Oh, hi, everyone. Today I'll be talking about Kubernetes and distributed systems. Kubernetes being one of the few distributed systems I found very interesting and would like to speak about on that. So what is a distributed system? So a distributed system is simply any environment multiple computers or devices are working on a variety of tasks and components, all spread across a network. Components with distributed systems split up the work, coordinating efforts to a given job more effectively than if that single device ran on it. So our traditional way of how we would normally run software was through a monolith, where we have one main component running that software. This splits up the job and makes it a bit easier. So now I'll talk about the difference between a monolith and microservices. So well, microservices being one of many distributed systems you can get, microservices just very more specific to that. So a distributed system and monolith systems represent two different architecture approaches for designing and building software applications. Monolithic applications are centralized and run on a single process or executable on a server, whereas distributed system can be running on multiple different servers at the same time, where they communicate doing specific different things. So an example would be, think about organs in your body. They all work together in a similar fashion to get one main purpose done, to keep you alive. Whereas, well, a monolith could be just one of your organs, or you could see it in different ways. Then I'll go into some of the benefits. Why would you choose a microservice? Updates and maintenance, making changes on updates on monolithic applications can be a bit risky, because times there would have to be where your monolith would have to shut down so that you can roll out an update. Whereas if you deploy through microservices or distributed system, you can roll out that individually, keeping all services alive at the same time. In terms of scalability, you can always add vertically and horizontally different nodes to what you have, making your system more distributed systems. I'll just talk about some of the downsides. So it can be quite complex to actually set up some distributed systems. The fact that you have to add more components can be a bit difficult, because networking is not one of the easiest things to do. Many people can vouch for that. The consistency is very difficult as well. Whereas if you have multiple services talking to each other, data doesn't always stay the same, or data becomes stale, and it's a bit difficult to actually manage that, to make sure that you have data consistency through components. And also the cost with distributed systems is also quite hefty, depending on how you set it up. Whereas compared to a monolith, your monolith only needs one runtime, one server, whereas your distributed system will be running on multiple different machines. And especially if you're doing it through cloud service providers, that can also be quite hefty. And then also consistency models. Distributed systems rely on various consistency models, whereas your data can be eventually consistent or strong consistent. You have to decide whether you want to keep stale data or with less frequent database calls, which is more cost efficient. But at the same time, you'll be giving out data, which is bad, because if you need a system that needs that fresh data, or it's important that to keep that new data, then unfortunately, then you're going to have to give up one of the two. Okay, so now I'll talk about Kubernetes. Kubernetes is one of the many different distributed systems or microservices people talk about. So what is Kubernetes? Everybody talks about Kubernetes, like, and try to throw it in everything, just like I can see on the meme. So this the must is it. Kubernetes, often abbreviated as K8, is an open source container orchestration platform that automates deployment, scaling, management, and containerized applications. It was originally developed by Google and now maintained by the CNFCF Foundation. Kubernetes provides a powerful framework of container orchestration, allowing users to effectively manage and coordinate containerized workloads across cluster of workloads. So simply to explain what Kubernetes is, I'll explain to you like how it would be for a 5-year-old. So let's say you have a bunch of different toys that you play with. And you need to basically manage all those toys in their own way. So think of Kubernetes as a magical toy manager that makes sure that each toy can work together effectively and communicate easily. That way you don't have to do hard work. So the benefits of Kubernetes is, I would say, a distributed system, but there's a bit of abstraction that goes into it, whereas it does a lot of the container orchestration for you, simplifies the management, whereas some other distributed systems, a lot of other things will be manual. Kubernetes kind of does this for you. It handles automatic scaling. It handles load balancing and service discovery. Yeah, it's built-in service discovery and load balancing ensures requests are routed to the right containers regardless of the location of the cluster. So that just makes it a bit easier. And then there is a bit of drawbacks to Kubernetes. It does make it simpler, but at the same time, certain things that you try to abstract do become a bit more complex. So complexity, setting up and configuring can be hell on its own, because I know a lot of people work with YAML and yeah, yeah, that erases it for itself. The learning curve can also be quite difficult and time consuming and may require significant investment in training and both development and operations teams on their side. It's kind of ironic that Kubernetes strives to make orchestration better and easier to use at the same time, but somehow ended up being more complex in its own extracted way than a normal traditional distributed system. And then I'll speak a bit about AWS Lambdas. So recently an article about how Amazon Prime lower their monthly costs by 90% by shifting part of their system called VQA from a serverless microservice architecture to a monolith server. So there is benefits of using a distributed system, but at the same time, there's no need to overcomplicate things if you know that you should something effectively through a monolith. So in conclusion, I think when designing your architecture, you should think about, do you really need to use the latest, coolest new tech, or do you need to get what you need done, you know? Yeah, that's just a bit about that. And that's it from me. Thank you.